March 7, 1907, page 229. What occurred this morning has altered me in a way I cannot reconcile. I have not spoken to anybody about it, and I'm not sure how I ever will. A stranger came into our office today. At first I thought it was another reporter who somehow got past the police guards and was hunting me down for more details on the Mary Mallon case. It turned out that the man had read my name in the newspaper and came with a secret that he'd been holding on to for nearly a decade. For some reason, I don't know why, I feared his presence the moment I saw him. Whatever news this man had to offer, Mr. Soper could hear. But I could not stop him from taking the chair across from me, and I certainly could not ask Mr. Soper to leave. He said his name was Tim Wilcox. He was missing his right leg, and he walked with canes. His clothes hung loosely from his thin chest. His eyes seemed ill and watery as he stared at me. "You look just like him," he said quietly. "To whom are you referring, sir?" I asked. He handed over a large coin on a chain, though it didn't seem like a regular coin. "Your father. That's where I met him," he said, pointing to the coin. All the breath in my body left me. I shook my head. My mind was suddenly blank. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," I said. "That's his war badge," Mr. Wilcox said. He tapped a cane against his good leg. "After the Spanish blew up the USS Maine, docked in the Cuban harbor, me and your father were sent to fight alongside Roosevelt." My face felt numb, my mouth dry. I looked more closely at the badge, the imprint of the American flag, and the name stamped on it. I ran my finger over the letters. Gregory Galuski. Army ID number 3040. My father's name. I looked up at the man, whose words blocked my throat, the question at my lips. "Is he alive?" "We were overcome by land forces on the beach," Mr. Wilcox went on. "I was shot in the thigh, and your father carried me to the forest, to our headquarters, where they removed my leg. As you can see, I recovered. Not all of me, but enough." He took a deep breath. "I'm sorry I can't say the same for your pa," he said. It couldn't be. I stared at the man, trying to understand, trying not to believe him. I coughed and shook my head, swallowed back tears. We waited so long, hoping for his return, and now this. I looked over at Mr. Soper. When I met his eyes, he stood and excused himself from the room, saying he had to see Mr. Briggs. I wanted to reach for him, but he slipped away. The man gestured to the badge in my hand. "Your father asked me to keep that from the medical doctors, to hide his badge so he would not be counted among the dead," he said. "But why?" I whispered. "He was sick with yellow fever. He wanted you to remember him in a certain way. He wanted you to think he was shot or taken hostage or not killed by disease." My father seemed cruel to me suddenly, cruel in his desire to maintain his honor. Pride. It was blind pride that made him do it. He wanted me to go to my grave with his secret. "But when I saw your name in the paper," Mr. Wilcox said, "with me not so far from my own grave, it wasn't right. I thought you should know." I closed my eyes, grateful that this man had come to see me. My heart ached, but I knew the truth. I put the badge on my desk, looking at my father's name. A piece of metal had hung around his neck. He had touched this man in front of me. He had saved his life. Did he ever speak of me?" I asked. My voice sounded high and weak. Mr. Wilcox nodded. "You and your mother, and your brother, his son Benjamin." He shook his head sadly. "Miss Galuski, I want you to know I argued with your pa about his decision, but he was stubborn. He was a stubborn ox and wouldn't listen. Since he saved my life, I had to respect his wishes. Up until now, of course, I hope I did the right thing." I looked into his watery eyes. I wanted to reach over my desk and touch him, to bring back my father through him. I laced my fingers and squeezed them together as hard as I could. "Of course you did the right thing," I said. "Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. If you hadn't come, we would never have known. We've waited so long." I could not help the cry that escaped me and the tears that streamed down my face, and I covered my eyes with my hands, pushing back the flood that tumbled out of me. I couldn't stop it. Mr. Wilcox cleared his throat. He said my name. I looked up and saw him standing before my desk, holding out a handkerchief, and I took it. He bowed his head and he limped to the door, and he quietly left. I felt as if my insides had collapsed. How would I tell Marm? How would she feel? And how could my father have been so selfish? Didn't he know how much we loved him? Did he think we would forget him? Not wait for him? All the years, all the sorrows bottled up, all the hope that's been kept going. How could he have done this to us? I heard footsteps outside the door and hastily wiped the tears from my face, and I slid the badge from the desk and I put it in the drawer where I also kept a few brief notes from Mr. Soper had written to me. I had to focus on my work. I had to find a way to keep going. I opened a case folio and I rolled a piece of paper into a typing machine and I placed my fingers on the keys and I made myself move them. Mr. Soper returned. He sat at his desk and went to work without addressing me. I was relieved by his silent presence beside me. I don't know how I lasted out the day, but somehow I did. When work was finished that evening, I removed the badge and the notes from my drawer and I fit them into my purse. And Mr. Soper left the building with me and walked me to the streetcar stop. There he took my hand. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said. His touch reached straight into me. The warmth of his hand soothed my shocked heart. "Mr. Soper," I said, "I apologize for not telling you." "You were being very professional, Prudence, and I appreciate that." He still held my hand. He was so near I could smell his sweet cologne. "For years we didn't know what had become of my father," I said. Mr. Soper took my other hand. "It's difficult to lose a loved one," he said. "You're a brave girl." His brown eyes looked into mine, and the blood beat in my ears. My face burned. He released my hands just as the trolley pushed in and opened its doors, and then I did the unthinkable. I felt he would not turn me away. I rose up and kissed him on the cheek, and then I ran up the steps without bidding him good night. On the streetcar, I could feel the roughness of his skin, the edge of his mustache on my lips, and I could still feel it still. I berated myself for not being able to contain my feelings. I came home to an empty, cold house. A note from Marm told me that she was at a birth. I started a fire in the stove and tried to push away the persistent question that nagged at me. What had I just done? The prospect of facing Mr. Soper suddenly frightened me. I splashed my face with cool water from the basin, and I took the basin and my chief's precious notes, and I hid them inside the blotter case by the window, and then I began to scrub potatoes for the stew. At last Marm came home, blood on her skirt and a sadness hanging about her. Sensing the birth had not gone well, I hesitated telling her of the visit. All evening I tried to think of a way to break the news, but Marm seemed too tired and too sad. I write this now, unable to sleep. Beside me I hold the book that Papa gave me. After Benny died and he left, and it was the one thing that kept me strong, that he would come back. And I could talk to him about all that I had learned from it. And now, to find that a disease had taken his life, after Papa left, something in me cracked and leaked one drop at a time. With the news the stranger brought, a giant gush has broken through the crack, and all the water has poured out. Now I am left with a vast hollowness that I know not how to fill.